Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Yesterday, and this is part 3 of my Hall of the Beginner series for Final Fantasy XIV. In this video, we have a few topics to cover, including Hotbar Setup and Keybind mapping. We will also be discussing the Global Cooldown, off Global Cooldown abilities. We'll be looking at damage over time and healing over time abilities, what that really means in the game and the tooltips, and we'll be examining casts versus instant cast abilities as well, and how to utilize your oGCDs effectively. Alright, so before we begin, I'm just going to add a few actions to my hotbars. You can find these under the character menu, actions, and traits. I will be adding limit break as well as duty action 1 and 2 to my hotbars. The duty actions you don't have to worry about right now. I'm just setting myself up for down the road. Limit break you're probably going to want to add because you will end up using this in dungeons or raid content. While I'm here, we might as well check out the role actions. None of them are available to me yet because my level is too low, but these are unlocked as you level for your role. So as your job reaches levels, you'll unlock it for all other jobs in that role. Some of these are a necessity really for your job, so you'll just want to keep an eye on this as you progress your leveling experience. So in order to change our keybinds, we will be navigating to the System Keybinds menu. This will bring up essentially all the keybinds in the game, those that are active, as well as options for those that are currently inactive, where you can populate a desired keybind if you like. By browsing through the various menus, you can see what current actions are bound to certain keys. You can also see for each action you can have 2 keybinds, so you can have a primary and an alternate if you desire. For now, what I'm going to be doing is showing off how to utilize shift modifiers as well as the available mouse buttons you may have even if you don't have an MMO mouse. Those buttons are M4, M5, and M3. Depending on the mouse you have, this could be just tilting your mouse wheel left or right or pressing it as a button. If you test those out while selecting a keybind, you'll see if it works or not for you. So as you can see, I'm going down and assigning a second option for these buttons. I'm using simply M3, M4, and M5, and I'm using Shift, Control, Alt modifiers, as well as doubling up, so you can do Control plus Shift, Control plus Alt, Shift plus Alt if you desire. So you can fill up almost 2 full hotbars using just 3 mouse buttons and some modifiers. This can go a long way for someone who doesn't have an MMO mouse and isn't really considering one. If you do have a 12-button MMO mouse, obviously all those are available to you as well, as long as you've bound them to some keys. Typically, in my case, I actually only bind 6 keys to the 12 mice buttons because I have a pretty large thumb and I don't like to have the overlap, risking fat fingering a button on accident, so I actually double up the functional keys. Even that gives me a lot of freedom to cover every single job in the game without really needing much on the keyboard, and I can use my mouse for just about everything. So now that I've explained that, I'm actually going to run down real quick and assign all my primary keys to the buttons I utilize. It's going to look really strange for a bit. It's going to look like I have huge fingers because I jump from 1, 2, 3 all the way over to 7. The reason for that is 7, 8, 9, 0, minus, and equals are all actually bound to my mouse. I skipped 4, 5, and 6 just out of habit before. When I first set up my MMO mouse, I still used those 3 keys on the keyboard. I don't do that anymore, but I kept the assigned locations just because I was used to that. This process can be a bit time consuming, taking a few minutes. I apologize for this kind of filled time, but at the same time I'm doing this tutorial, I figure I might as well show how long it takes in the actual process I go through when setting up my hotbars. Alright, and I'm just finishing up this. Again, I apologize for the time it takes, but you do want to set about 3 hotbars to be bound to buttons if you like utilizing the buttons on your mouse or keyboard. That's about all you should need for each job. You may have some overlap somewhere here or there, but for the most part, 3 bars will do the trick for pretty much every single job in the game in terms of job-specific actions. Alright, upon finishing, I've got to take a small detour here and change my HUD again. I do like to have my bar sorted from top to bottom in terms of unmodified shift modifier, control modifier key. That's how I have it set up on my main character, so I want to try to duplicate that the best I can on this character as well. And again, just doing a few small tweaks here or there just to get these bars lined up properly. Want to make sure I can click all my buttons effectively without, having to, misclick something else. You can see kind of the lock on the hotbars. If it's too close to a button, you actually won't be able to click it. So I need to make sure I have space to click on that effectively when I want to unlock and maybe drag something on the hotbars. Alright, so while I'm finishing up the hotbars, it's time to discuss the Global Cooldown, or GCD as it'll most frequently be referred. This refers to essentially, and the easiest way to look at this is the recast time on most of your abilities. Similarly, it is the charge time for a lot of caster abilities, although not all. The nice thing about starting as Arcanist is I actually have a casted ability with Ruin, and I also have an instant cast ability with Bio, which is also a damage over time ability, so I get to discuss kind of all 3 at once without having to swap jobs right now. So first let's look at a cast. Ruin 1 is a casted damage spell for Arcanist. It has a 2.5 second cast as shown here, and when I am casting, you'll see that the rest of my bars actually blank out, which means I can't act during that cast. Like, no other functions will work. You can move, but it'll cancel your cast. Next, I'd like to discuss instant cast as well as a damage over time ability with Bio. So an instant cast ability does not have a cast time. You'll see the second I press the button, it acts, and my GCD begins, the recast timer begins. The important thing about this is because I'm not casting, I can actually perform other non-global cooldown actions during this window. We can't see it on this character because I don't have them, and I'll actually swap later to show those. Looking at the skill description, Bio 2 is also an ability that does damage over time. We want to maximize the amount of time that debuff is present on the enemy to get the most damage out of it in that one cast. The nice thing is, while that is happening, I can just keep casting Ruin to do additional damage on top of it. As an example here, I'm showing you what happens if you keep using the Bio button. You'll see it keeps refreshing the duration on the debuff on the enemy, but it's not really doing much damage because each individual tick doesn't do a lot. It's really through those 30 seconds that you get the full damage effect. And finally here, I'm just kind of showing a more optimal use, which is start with the damage over time attack, let it run, and use Ruin. In this case, the enemies don't have much HP, so there's really no reason at all to use Bio. But for other enemies that have more HP, you're going to want to be using that as long as it'll get most of its duration out. What I'm going to do now is actually swap to my main character because I would like to show more of what you can do with instant cast type abilities. If you're a melee job or even physical range job, almost all your abilities are going to be instant cast. So really most of the jobs in the game, we want to see what that interacts with, and also want to discuss off global cooldown abilities, otherwise called oGCDs, when you use them and how to utilize them effectively. Okay, so now that I swapped over to my main character, you can see I'm on a warrior, which has a pretty decent amount of oGCD abilities, as you will see. I will actually show you what they look like while you are using your normal GCD abilities. You will see that while your GCDs are grayed out and have sort of the clock going around them, oGCDs are still available to use, and that's really what it means, is that these abilities have their own cooldown timers and can be used in between windows of using your global cooldown skills. So I'll show you this through the combos and utilizing my oGCD cooldowns and etc. Before we do that though, I would like to discuss combo actions, which are abilities that, when used after their combo action ability, will provide increased potency and sometimes other effects. You can see here when I'm hitting heavy swing that the main button actually has a yellow highlighted box around it. That suggests that it is an available combo action, and I want to use heavy swing, then maim, and then after that you'll actually see Storm's Path, Storm's Eye open up because there's 2 combo finishers in this case. In addition, we have proc type abilities. You can see here when I use Infuriate that my Shift 8 key glows. What that means is that I have a new ability that is available to use because of a buff or something else. As you can see here, there's a buff on my bar which lets me use Inner Chaos. While there is a little bit more to know about combos in terms of how long they last, what actions may break the combos and what ones don't, I really just wanted to get the general idea out there available so that you understand that you have combo abilities and that you'll generally want to use them in their combo order. Now that I finished that brief bit about combo actions, I'd like to move back to the discussion of GCD versus oGCD abilities and showing how to properly utilize those oGCDs during combat. So as you can see, as I am using my GCDs, there's a nice clock kind of going around on all the icons that are part of the GCD. That means I can't use those while that is circling, but the oGCDs are still clear buttons. You know, you can see them very visibly, and I can use them without interrupting any of my other actions, and that's really pivotal to getting, you know, better at the game, is knowing when and how to use those effectively. I'm doing a bit of clicking just to show, you know, what button's being pressed at the given time. I don't normally click, but I think it's more useful for kind of displaying what's being done. You can also see that you can use your oGCD abilities even when your GCD isn't rolling, but if you do so, it creates a delay between your next GCD type action. So in general, you kind of want to use these in between your GCD type abilities. So in this case, between heavy swing and maim, I can use Nascent Flash, you know, Infuriate, any of my other abilities. Between maim and Storm's Eye or Storm's Path, I can use another oGCD as well. For most GCDs in this game, the default is 2.5. It can get faster as you get more skill or spell speed. Until you get really fast, you can generally use 2 oGCD skills in between each GCD cast. If you have high ping or if your job goes really fast, you may only be able to get 1. In general, try to stick to at most 2, otherwise 1. If you have incredible ping and like a slow GCD, you can do 3, but I would definitely not recommend that in general. To finish up real quickly, I do want to discuss single target versus Aoe actions. You can see here Warrior has an Aoe ability called Overpower. It does 120 potency to all enemies in a cone in front of you. While these Aoe abilities have lower potency than your single target actions, do keep in mind that your overall potency is determined by how many enemies you're also hitting with that ability. So 120, while less than 200, if you're hitting 2 enemies, is going to be greater because it'll be 240. The more enemies there are, the more likely you're going to be to use Aoe. This is particularly important for tanks in dungeon type content or where there's multiple enemies, as using Aoe means that the enemies will be aggro to you instead of attacking your DPS or your healers, who will also be generating aggro due to healing or their own Aoe abilities. Okay, and that's really all I've got for this one. I really just wanted to go over some of the basics of the global cooldown, oGCDs, kind of what they mean, do a brief explanation on damage over time, which does apply to healing over time as well. So if you're a healer and you get abilities like Regen, Medica 2, Aspected Benefit later on, these abilities do healing over time. You really want to maximize how long that buff stays on your ally to get as much healing out of that ability as you can, which frees you up to do other things during that time frame. Utilizing those effectively will really go a long way. It is important to note, though, that effectively doesn't mean 100% uptime, at least on the healing aspect. You really do want your dots, as we'll call them, up just about all the time. If you let those run out their full duration, they will be your strongest per cast abilities for the most part. Healing, on the other hand, if someone's got full HP, you don't need to keep healing them for no reason. Those types of things will probably get discussed more if I continue on, do a Hall of the Novice series, just kind of details about that. The general idea is, though, damage over time, aim for 100% uptime, let those dots run all the way out, healing over time if you need it. If someone has full HP, you don't have to heal them. And with that, I'd like to thank you for sitting through this whole video if you did. If not, I'd appreciate whatever you happen to glean from it. Hopefully it was valuable to you. This is the last of the Hall of the Beginner series. Be sure, if you haven't checked them out, to check the HUD layout video and the getting started video for anyone really brand new to the game, looking into buying options, world options, learning about the classes and different worlds, data centers, and everything else. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else you'd like to see, or maybe if you'd like to see some clarity on some of these things. Otherwise, thank you for your time and good luck in Eorzea.